Okay, so remember when we left off, they'd found out that they were about to be transported out of the ghettos that were created in his hometown. The ghetto was awake. One after the other, the lights were going on behind the windows. I went into the house of one of my father's friends. I woke the head of the household, a man with a gray beard and the gaze of a dreamer. His back was hunched over from untold nights spent studying. Get up, sir, get up. You must ready yourself for the journey. Tomorrow you will be expelled. You and your family, you and all the other Jews. Where to? Don't ask me, sir. Don't ask questions. God alone could answer you. For heaven's sake, get up. He had no idea what I was talking about. He probably thought I'd lost my mind. What are you saying? Get ready for a journey? What journey? Why? What's happening? Have you gone crazy? Half asleep, he was staring at me, his eyes filled with terror as though he expected me to burst out laughing and tell him to go back to bed, to sleep, to dream, that nothing had happened. It was all in jest, all a joke. My throat was dry and the words were choking me, paralyzing my lips. There was nothing else to say. At last he understood. He got out of bed and began to dress automatically. Then he went over to the bed where his wife lay sleeping and with infinite tenderness touched her forehead. She opened her eyes, and it seemed to me that a smile crossed her lips. Then he went to wake his two children. They woke with a start, torn from their dreams. I fled. Time went by quickly. It was already 4 in the morning. My father was running right and left, exhausted, consoling friends, checking with the Jewish council just in case the order had been rescinded. To the last moment, people clung to hope. The women were boiling eggs, roasting meat, preparing cakes, sewing backpacks. The children were wandering about aimlessly, not knowing what to do with themselves, to stay out of the way of the grown-ups. Our backyard looked like a marketplace. Valuable objects, precious rugs, silver candlesticks, Bibles, and other ritual objects were strewn over the dusty grounds. Pitiful relics that seemed never to have had a home. All this under a magnificent blue sky. By 8 in the morning, weariness had settled into our veins, our limbs, our brains like molten lead. I was in the midst of prayer when suddenly there was shouting in the streets. I quickly unwound my phylacteries and ran to the window. Hungarian police had entered the ghetto and were yelling in the street nearby. All Jews outside! Hurry! They were followed by Jewish police who, their voices breaking, told us, the time has come. You must leave all this. The Hungarian police used their rifle butts, their clubs, to indiscriminately strike old men and women, children and cripples. One by one, the houses emptied and the streets filled with people carrying bundles. By 10, everyone was outside. The police were taking roll calls, once, twice, 20 times. The heat was oppressive and sweat streamed from people's faces and bodies. Children were crying for water. Water. There was water close by inside the houses, the backyards, but it was forbidden to break rank, to leave the line. Water, mother, I'm thirsty. Some of the Jewish police secretly went to fill a few jugs. My sisters and I were still allowed to move about, as we were destined for the last convoy, so we helped as best we could. At last, at 1 in the afternoon, came the signal to leave. There was joy. Yes, joy. People must have thought there would be no greater torment in God's hell than being stranded here on the sidewalk among the bundles, in the middle of the street under a blazing sun. Anything seemed preferable to that. They began to walk, without another glance at the abandoned streets, the dead, empty houses, the gardens, the tombstones. On everyone's back there was a sack, in everyone's eyes tears and distress. Slowly, heavily, the procession advanced towards the gate of the ghetto. And there I was on the sidewalk, watching them file past, unable to move. Here came the chief rabbi, hunched over, his face strange-looking without a beard, a bundle on his back. His very presence in the procession was enough to make the scene seem surreal. It was like a page torn from a book, a historical novel, perhaps, dealing with captivity in Babylon or the Spanish Inquisition. They passed me by one after the other, my teachers, my friends, the others, some of whom I had once feared, some of whom I'd found ridiculous, all those whose lives I had shared for years. There they went, defeated, their bundles, their lives in tow, having left behind their homes, their childhood. They passed me by like beaten dogs, with never a glance in my direction. They must have envied me. The procession disappeared around the corner, and a few steps more and they were beyond the ghetto walls. The street resembled fairgrounds deserted in haste. There was a little of everything: suitcases, briefcases, bags, knives, dishes, banknotes, papers, faded portraits, all the things one planned to take along and finally left behind. They had ceased to matter. Open rooms everywhere, gaping windows and doors looked out into the void. It all belonged to everyone, since it no longer belonged to anyone. It was there for the taking, an open tomb, a summer sun. We spent the day without food, but we were not really hungry, we were just exhausted. My father had accompanied the deportees as far as the ghetto's gate. They first had been herded through the main synagogue, where they were thoroughly searched to make sure they were not carrying gold, silver, or other valuables. There had been incidents of hysteria and harsh blows. "When will it be our turn?" I asked my father. "The day after tomorrow, unless things work out. A miracle, perhaps." Where were the people being taken? Did anyone know yet? No, the secret was well kept. Night had fallen. That evening we went to bed early, and my father said, "Sleep peacefully, children. Nothing will happen until the day after tomorrow, Tuesday." Monday went by like a small summer cloud, like a dream in the first hours of dawn. Intent on preparing our backpacks, on baking breads and cakes, we no longer thought about anything. The verdict had been delivered. That evening our mother made us go to bed early, to conserve our strength, she said. It was to be the last night spent in our home. I was up at dawn. I wanted to have time to pray before leaving. My father had risen before all of us to seek information in town, and he returned around 8. Good news! We were not leaving town today. We were only moving to the small ghetto. That is where we were to wait for the last transport. We would be the last to leave. At 9 o'clock the previous Sunday's scenes were repeated. Policemen wielding clubs were shouting, "All Jews outside!" We were ready. I went out first. I did not want to look at my parents' face. I didn't want to break into tears. We remained sitting in the middle of the street like the others 2 days earlier. The same hellish sun, the same thirst, only there was no one left to bring us water. I looked at my house, in which I had spent years seeking my God, fasting to hasten the coming of the Messiah, imagining what my life would be like later. Yet I felt little sadness. My mind was empty. "Get up! Roll call!" We stood, we were counted, we sat down, we got up again, over and over. We waited impatiently to be taken away. What were they waiting for? Finally the order came. Forward, march. My father was crying. It was the first time I'd seen him cry. I'd never thought it possible. As for my mother, she was walking, her face a mask, without a word, deep in thought. I looked at my little sister Zipporah, her blonde hair neatly combed, her red coat over her arm, a little girl of 7. On her back a bag too heavy for her. She was clenching her teeth. She already knew it was useless to complain. Here and there the police were lashing out with their clubs. Faster! I had no strength left. The journey had just begun, and I already felt so weak. Faster! Faster! Move, you lazy good-for-nothings! The Hungarian police were screaming. That was when I began to hate them, and my hatred remains our only link today. They were our first oppressors. They were the first faces of hell and death. They ordered us to run, and we began to run. Who would have thought that we were so strong? From behind their windows, from behind their shutters, our fellow citizens watched as we passed. We finally arrived at our destination. Throwing down our bundles, we dropped to the ground. O God, Master of the universe, in your infinite compassion, have mercy on us. The small ghetto. Only 3 days ago, people were living here, people who own the things we were using now. They had been expelled, and we'd already forgotten all about them. The chaos was even greater here than in the large ghetto. Its inhabitants evidently been caught by surprise. I visited the rooms that had been occupied by my Uncle Mendel's family. On the table a half-finished bowl of soup, a platter of dough waiting to be baked. Everywhere on the floor were books. Had my uncle meant to take them along? We settled in, what a word, and I went looking for wood. My sisters lit a fire, and despite her fatigue, my mother began to prepare a meal. We cannot give up, she kept repeating. People's morale was not so bad. We were beginning to get used to the situation. There were those who even voiced optimism. The Germans were running out of time to expel us, they argued. Tragically, for those who'd already been deported, it was too late. As for us, chances were that we would be allowed to go on with our miserable little lives until the end of the war. The ghetto was not guarded. One could enter and leave as one pleased. Maria, our former maid, came to see us. Sobbing, she begged us to come with her to her village, where she had prepared a safe shelter. But my father wouldn't hear of it. He told me and my big sisters, "If you wish, go there. I shall stay here with your mother and the little one." Naturally, we refused to be separated. Night. No one was praying for the night to pass quickly. The stars were but sparks of the immense conflagration that was consuming us. Were this conflagration to be extinguished one day, nothing would be left in the sky but extinct stars and unseeing eyes. There was nothing else to do but go to bed in the beds of those who'd moved on. We needed to rest, gather our strength. At daybreak, gloom had lifted. The mood was more confident. There were those who said, "Who knows? They may be sending us away for our own good. The front is getting closer. We shall soon hear the guns, and then surely the civilian population will be evacuated." They worry lest we join the partisans, who were like underground fighters. As far as I'm concerned, this whole business of deportation is nothing but a farce. Don't laugh. They just want to steal our valuables and jewelry. They know it's all been buried and they'll have to dig to find it. So much easier to do when the owners are on vacation. On vacation. This kind of talk that nobody believed helped pass the time. The few days we spent here went by pleasantly enough in relative calm. People rather got along. There was no longer any distinction between rich and poor, notable and others. We were all people condemned to the same fate, still unknown. Saturday, the day of rest, was the day chosen for our expulsion. The night before, we had sat down to the traditional Friday night meal. We had said the customary blessings over the bread and the wine and swallowed the food in silence. We sensed that we were gathered around the family table for the last time. I spent that night going over memories and ideas and was unable to fall asleep. At dawn, we were in the streets ready to leave. This time, there was no Hungarian police. It had been agreed that the Jewish Council would handle everything by itself. Our convoy headed toward the main synagogue. The town seemed deserted, but behind the shutters, our friends of yesterday were probably waiting for the moment that they could loot our homes. The synagogue resembled a large railroad station, baggage in tiers. The altar was shattered, the wall covering shredded, the walls themselves bare. There were so many of us we could hardly breathe. The 24 hours we spent there were horrendous. Men downstairs, women upstairs. It was Saturday, the Sabbath, and it was as though we were there to attend services. But forbidden to go outside, people had to relieve themselves in a corner. The next morning, we walked toward the station where a convoy of cattle cars was waiting. The Hungarian police made us climb into the cars, 80 persons in each one. They handed us some bread, a few pails of water. They checked the bars and the windows to make sure that they would not come loose. The cars were sealed, and one person was placed in charge of every car. If someone managed to escape, that person would be shot. Two Gestapo officers strolled down the length of the platform. They were all smiles. All things considered, it had gone very smoothly. A prolonged whistle pierced the air. The wheels began to grind. We were on our way.